Kia ora koutou, Markie here, with my glasses reflecting the light, but I'm going to need to have them on, with a bit of demystification, which I haven't done for, it feels like forever, really. I mean, this channel really is about demystification, but I've kind of strayed into other areas, really, which have been quite popular, but I'm missing the demystification, but I haven't had chance to get to it for a long time, or energy, or time. So, first of all, thank you very much for all the really nice warm wishes that I had after my post about my eye surgery. That's gone really well, as you can hopefully see. Nice shiny new eye with a new lens in it, which will last a lifetime. So thank you for that. YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, this will come out on Patreon as well. I have been doing some funny things. I just want to quickly mention that, really, that it's unsubscribing people. So if I've subscribed to you and I seem to have disappeared, please don't feel that you've offended me and I've kind of banished you. It's something that YouTube are doing, so just resubscribe and I'll be resubscribed. I have been actively resubscribing to lots of people, so you might have seen me pop up where you haven't, haven't for a long time. So okay, so on with the show. So back along on World Autism Awareness Day. I posted a video and I'll put a link to it below saying, what are your questions about autism? And I'll do my best to answer them. Now, I also gave the kind of caveat that I don't consider myself an expert on autism. I'm on the autistic spectrum myself, and therefore I've looked into it an awful lot, and I've done lots of work which has involved people with autism, although I haven't actually worked directly with people's autism. I've been working with people with other issues, and these people that I've worked with happen to be autistic. There's been high kind of correlation between autism of various kinds and other neurodiverse conditions with the issues that I've been working with. So just to say where I come from, really. So then there are probably some questions that I've been asked that I can't answer, and I might have to look into and come back and maybe do a part 2. So I haven't prepared for this at all, because I never do. I also have ADHD. So what I'm going to do, I'm just literally looking at the screen now. I'm going to put my spectacles on, and I'm going to have a look at the questions and see what I can answer here and now. I'm a bit time limited, so I may need to. There's a good chance that this will run into a part 2, so bear with me. So if I don't get to your question today, then don't worry, I will do it in a part 2. So Dawn de Chamuel, the wonderful Dawn de Chamuel, who is now one of my colleagues in Retroactive Jealousy, and Dawn is somebody that I used to work with back along in the drug and alcohol sphere. And she's brilliant. So what she said: didn't know that gender differences to autism existed. Am I right in believing everyone is in the spectrum? In my limited experience, people I know who have autism seem to be very clever in specific areas that interest them, and also in terms of general knowledge. Is this common? Okay, so there's a lot in that question. That's a multiple question, isn't it? So, gender differences to autism. Okay, so it's not something I know a great deal about. What I do know is that women, particularly girls with autism, it's under-recognised, and one of the beliefs around that is that women are brought up, they're kind of conditioned to, they're expected, if you like, to be more empathic, more socially aware and all that kind of thing, so that the autism isn't recognised, it's kind of covered up, whereas sometimes people describe autism as extreme maleness. So sometimes the characteristics of autism can be almost reinforced in a male environment. So that's all I can probably say to that. Am I right in believing that everyone is in the spectrum? Okay, that's a really interesting one. And I would say no, because otherwise there's no point having a spectrum. There has to be a difference, really. I think autism is a bunch of traits, okay, or it involves a bunch of traits and a bunch of qualities, a bunch of behaviours, a bunch of sensitivities, a bunch of abilities, Very long one, I think, far longer, a far longer list of things than the medical diagnostic criteria for autism often are. And one of the common phrases is if you've met a person with autism, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because it's very, very broad. So although these are all kind of traits that anybody could have in a very low degree. If they're in a very, very low degree, then they're not on the spectrum. So I think it is a very wide spectrum, but I do believe that most people are not on it. It is, I'm not sure what the proportion is, but it's a minority of people that are, more than people think, I would say, far more people than are diagnosed, far more people than realise it are on the autistic spectrum. But no, not everybody. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is a common thing that people say. So people seem to have autism, seem to be very clever in specific areas that interest them, and also in terms of general knowledge. Is this common? Yes, that's what's known as a special interest. So somebody with autism can basically become very fixated, very obsessive about particular things that interest them. I think sometimes because I don't know, I'm not speculating now, but I think in a way because they struggle socially and struggle to relate to people, in a way that it's kind of safer and more productive for autistic people to throw their energy into a topic or a subject. So yes, it's called the special interest, and that's very common. In terms of general knowledge, yeah, it can be, but people with autism could also have huge kind of gaps in their knowledge as well. It can be very mixed, very kind of spiky kind of sense of knowledge. Great knowledge in some areas and big gaps in others. Funny enough, that's how Dr. Watson described Sherlock Holmes in The Hound of the Baskervilles. It's interesting. So I've not read any Conan Doyle for a long time, so I can't. I wouldn't venture to say whether Sherlock Holmes would meet the kind of autism kind of characteristics. I suspect probably that he would. I'd have to reread it really to give an opinion on that. So I think what I need to do, rather than read these questions in order, which is sort of an easy way for me to do it, is I think I need to clarify a few things first that will make the rest more easy to understand. So I had lots of people that didn't leave a question but left kind words, and also supported the fact that I'm doing this video. So a number of people, WyattW official has asked this one. So quick question, what is Asperger syndrome? I know it's one of your example questions, but I want to know what it is. Yeah, really good one. Okay. So yeah, loads of comments here, so thank you for all the nice comments. Thank you for the questions, but it's just nice to have people pop in and say hi. Sorry about this, I should have planned this really, but planning is not. I do plan things. There's some things I plan meticulously, but other things I just don't. What is the spectrum? So to my Koto has asked me, okay, what is the spectrum? And has put a nice blue heart, because blue is the colour for autism. Lots of people have said, this is very close to their heart. What are the three main symptoms of autism? That's an interesting one. Uncle heavy gaming. And I know a few people have asked about this. What is Asperger's? Is it the same as autism? So I'm just trying to come to those people. God, I've got loads of comments here. It's taking me ages to go down through them all. So what we might do is maybe give some people a mention in the comments. Save you having a really boring experience of seeing me. What's the word? Scan down the page. So another question, can autism result from a febrile seizure? I don't know. Have you seen hard medical proof that autism can result from childhood vaccinations? That's a really good one. So I'll try and get back to that one. I don't know about the seizure one. There's a lot of... It's kind of interesting, you know, that what causes autism. It's not something I'm brilliantly upon. So lots of theories that it's actually, you know, beliefs that, you know, people are born with it and it's kind of, you know, genetic, which doesn't necessarily mean that your parents have it, but or that it can be developed through attachment issues and parenting and things like that. That's a very controversial view. Nobody seems to talk about that, but I think there's a possibility that in some cases it can be. I think in some cases there can be you know, physical issues that can cause it. I think maybe what we're talking about is autism-like symptoms, or symptoms that look like autism. So, sorry, I'm looking at this thing as I'm scanning through. Okay, so I should have planned this out, but I've forgotten how many comments I've had. How many comments have I had on this video? Scrolling through, it's millions. 216, right, okay, I didn't realise it was 216. I thought it was more like kind of 30 or 40, so. Okay, so Asperger's and autism. So actually Asperger's is no longer a kind of medical psychiatric term. So Asperger's syndrome is still more or less kind of still exists in the terminology, but with a different name. It's called high functioning autism. What it means is, so autism is very common among people who have what's commonly called these days a learning disability. Here in New Zealand, they tend to call it an intellectual disability, an ID. You know, back in the day, they used to call it a mental handicap. Or mental retardation, which I think they still say in America, don't they? Which kind of shocks my sensibilities. So basically, the very simple way of looking at it is Asperger. I mean, I think it's still fine to use the term, and I still use it. I refer to myself as an Aspie, although I'm not technically an Aspie, and I've covered that in other videos. It's if your IQ is of an above average level and you function reasonably well in life, in different domains of life, then it tends to be, the diagnosis tends to be Asperger's or high functioning autism. And autism is the word that tends to be used more often where there is also a learning disability or an intellectual disability or a low IQ. And I think autism is probably used more in children. At one point, autism, my experience was autism was a term that was used almost exclusively for children. And I used to think, well, what happens to these autistic children when they grow up then? Do they stop being autistic? Or, you know, does somebody, the child catcher come and take them away or what have you? Yeah, so that's the difference really. It's about IQ and level of function. So high functioning autism is a clearer name really. I guess Asperger syndrome was named after somebody called Asperger that came across the symptom. Apparently doctors that do research, apparently it's a very popular kind of sport to try and find a syndrome. So if you find a syndrome, you get it named after you. So apparently it's like a competitive sport among some kind of academic scholarly doctors to try and find similarities in symptoms, and then they can call it a syndrome and then have it named after them. So so often you know, people with autism are very, you know, it's very severe and they're very disabled. And that's where it tends to be referred to more as autism, and Asperger's or high functioning autism is the other end of the scale. But you can quite legitimately use the word autism for all of those things, and this is why the phrase ASC, autistic spectrum condition. Now, you're probably saying it's not ASC, Markie, it's ASD, autistic spectrum disorder. Well, technically, and in all the medical psychiatric literature, yes, it is, but I would argue that high functioning autism, or what was called Asperger's, should not be categorized purely as a disability or a disorder, because it can bring great things. And actually, some of the grooviest, most creative, most memorable people in the world and in history have been on the spectrum. So the spectrum, autistic spectrum condition. So yeah, spectrum is good, I think, because spectrum, means it's a very wide range. It kind of, it speaks of that diversity of presentations that lie within people with autism. So who is it who asked the question? What are the 3 symptoms of it? See, I wouldn't use the word symptoms. I would use the word traits or characteristics, because symptoms imply. I'm not having a go at you, by the way. I'm quite happy that you use the word symptoms. That's not a criticism or whatever. But as a professional, I would personally avoid that. But I can see where you're coming from with that. So the 3. I'm trying to find the question again now. I have to put this in. I have to do some homework and then credit people in the notes. Generally, and again, I probably should have looked at the diagnostic criteria before I did this, but I didn't. It's a lot around communication. So people on the autistic spectrum, they will sometimes struggle to read facial expressions or nuances. And lots of symptoms. I mean, lots of things, and things like, for example, a potential tendency to take things very literally, a difficulty with change. Now, I'm not too bad with a lot of change, but where I'm really bad is that if I've learned something, particularly things I learned in early childhood, I cling to really rigidly, which is why I'm always doing videos about correct English and correct pronunciation, and what I kind of uphold isn't necessarily always correct pronunciation. It's pronunciation I learned as a child, or things I learned as a child, and then cling very rigidly to, and get very upset when other people don't follow the rules. But sometimes deviations in routine can really throw somebody with autism. And then another big one is sensory over and under stimulation. I have to say, I'm very mild. I'm on the lighter end of the spectrum, and some of the superpowers. So you get not symptom but superpower, begins with S as well. Symptoms and superpowers, the opposite ends of the pros and cons. The special interest often comes about because people on the autistic spectrum have the potential to learn and retain information to a remarkable degree, to remember, to retain, to hold information, which is why the classic archetype really of somebody with autism is often kind of like the nerd, the bookish person that kind of states lots of facts. And often, as I've kind of alluded to before, we sometimes exchange facts as an alternative for what neurotypical people do when they engage, which is more about conversation, which is more about shooting the breeze and being in the moment and sharing experience and just connecting. We don't like doing that. We find that very boring and very odd, and we don't understand it. So, I had a colleague who used to talk about, some friends that were on the spectrum, and she always used to say they always started their sentences with in actual fact, or I think you'll find. And she used to do that voice as well, which could be deemed offensive to people on the spectrum, but I personally find that quite amusing. So I'm conscious that I'm running out of time, so we'll go to part 2, and I will organise myself a little bit. So I hope I have answered some of the questions. So we talked on. I think we at least we've covered the difference between, what's the difference between Asperger's, stroke, high functioning autism, and other forms of autism. I don't think we talk about low functioning autism very, very often, but I guess just look at them as both different ends of the spectrum, from the mild that's also accompanied with a high IQ to the more severe that's accompanied with a lower IQ. So we've talked about some of the main indicators of some of the main traits of autism. There's plenty more we can talk about. We talked a little bit about gender, talked a lot about the special interest. So I will painstakingly go through the comments and organise myself a little better, and we'll do a part 2. But it's not too late to ask a question. So do fire in with questions in the meantime, because we love your questions. And yeah, lovely to have such a great response to this video. So that will be it for now. If you're a subscriber and a follower, thank you. If you're watching this on Patreon and you're a patron, thank you even more. If you're a real person that's kind of wandered in from the land of YouTube, thanks very much for visiting, and please consider becoming a subscriber. Please hit the like button if you liked it, and if you didn't like it, don't hit the dislike button, because it's like I only ever hit the dislike button if I think somebody is actually sharing something which is harmful, you know, because it's like, you know, why be negative, really? So yeah, don't hit the dislike button. Just go and watch something else, because there's plenty more out there, and it's all free, you know, and I'm not making any money on this video, and I'm not charging you anything for it, so bugger off. So thank you for your support, and good to catch up with you. Hopefully be doing a lot more demystification in the near future. Big aroha rangi Mario. Thank you for watching.